It began with a bark. Not just any bark, the kind that cuts through air like a warning siren, a jolt straight to the spine. A sleepy Wednesday morning, 7th grade art class. Watercolors, whispered chatter, the low hum of a projector. Everything was normal, until it wasn't. In room 114 of Lincoln Middle School, Mrs. Carroll's students were sketching childhood memories. Brushstrokes met paper. Teenage sighs drifted lazily into the air. And then Dante moved. Dante wasn't just any dog. He was a retired bomb-sniffing German shepherd, brought into the school through a new pause and protection safety program. Part guardian, part mascot, Dante was loved by almost everyone. He played fetch in the quad, sat calmly during assemblies, and posed for selfies like a celebrity. But on that day, he growled, a low, guttural sound that turned heads. Then he stood. His handler, Officer Daniels, barely had time to rise from his seat near the back wall. Dante walked forward, slow, focused. His eyes locked not on a student, not on a stranger, but on a massive painting hanging at the front of the classroom. A moody, dark piece, a tattered American flag and shadowed soldiers stretching across a barren wasteland. It had always unsettled the kids. Mrs. Carroll said it was history, that it meant something. Dante thought so too. And then he lunged, growling, barking, snarling, his teeth ripped through the canvas. Paint splattered, brushes fell, screams, chaos. The painting tore clean down the middle, and what it revealed made time itself pause. Behind the shredded artwork was a small, rusted handle. Embedded in what looked like steel, not drywall. Officer Daniels pulled Dante back, heart racing. The classroom emptied in minutes. Whispers filled the hallway. Had Dante gone rogue? Was it a gas leak? A hidden weapon? Mrs. Carroll sat trembling, clutching the edges of her desk like they might anchor her to reality. "I didn't know," she whispered. "That painting, it's been in my family for years. My father gave it to me. But Dante didn't lie, and he wasn't wrong." The principal called for a lockdown. Officer Daniels stayed behind, staring at the hidden panel as if it might blink first. This wasn't just a painting. It was a door, a secret. And Dante, he was trying to tell them something that no one else could see. What lay beyond that wall would unearth a truth buried for decades. Truth painted over, sealed behind steel, and nearly forgotten, until a dog's instinct tore it open. And that was only the beginning. It started with a bark. Not just any bark, but the kind that shattered the calm like a thunderclap, turning a sleepy Wednesday morning into something no one would ever forget. One moment, Mrs. Carroll's 7th grade art class was a blur of watercolor and chatter. The next, a German shepherd named Dante was lunging toward a painting on the far wall, teeth bared, his growls ricocheting off the walls like gunfire. At first, everyone thought he had gone mad. Students screamed, paint cups spilled, brushes clattered to the floor, and standing at the center of it all, frozen like a statue, was Officer Daniels, Dante's handler. His eyes were locked on his canine partner, unsure whether to restrain him or let him finish what he had started. That painting wasn't just art. Dante knew something. And what he did next would uncover a secret buried deeper than anyone at Lincoln Middle School could have imagined. Let's rewind. The school had recently joined a new initiative, a pilot program pairing local police officers and K-9 units with schools. After a string of security incidents in neighboring districts, the city was ready for a change. Dante, a retired bomb-sniffing K-9 with an impeccable record, was assigned to Lincoln Middle School as part of that initiative. Most students adored him. He'd patrol the halls, sniff backpacks with gentle authority, and chase tennis balls during recess. To them, he wasn't a working dog. He was a furry superhero until he growled at the painting. The artwork had hung high, on the east wall of room 114 for as long as anyone could remember. It was massive, nearly floor-to-ceiling, painted in dark tones, depicting a tattered American flag waving over the silhouettes of soldiers. Most students found it creepy. But Mrs. Carroll, an art teacher with a soft voice and a haunted look, insisted it stayed. It's history, she would say. It's important. 10 minutes into class, as students painted childhood memories, Dante stirred. Normally stationed beside Officer Daniels at the back of the room, he stood up and walked slowly toward the painting. At first, Daniels assumed he'd caught a scent of lunch, or maybe a stray rodent. But then Dante's body stiffened. A low, guttural growl rose from his chest. "Dante, no," Daniels warned, stepping forward. Too late. The dog leapt at the bottom edge of the painting and sank his teeth into the canvas. It tore with a loud rip, sending gasps through the room. Mrs. Carroll screamed. Kids ducked under desks. Behind the shredded canvas was something no one expected. A small, rusted metal handle embedded in the wall. But it wasn't drywall, it was steel. Daniels rushed forward, grabbing Dante's harness, pulling him back. He stared at the exposed panel. "Get Principal Harding," he told a nearby student. The class emptied within minutes. The hallway buzzed with rumors. Had the dog smelled a bomb? Drugs? Was this some training gone wrong? Mrs. Carroll sat at her desk, visibly shaking. "I didn't know that was there," she repeated. "That painting's been in my family for decades. My father gave it to me." Daniels believed her, mostly, but Dante didn't lie. Within the hour, the school went into lockdown. An announcement echoed through the halls. "This is not a drill." When the bomb squad arrived, they brought magnetic tools and scanners. Carefully, they pried open the panel. A cold gust of air swept through the classroom. Behind the steel was a hidden room, about the size of a walk-in closet. Inside were rusted file cabinets, a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and stacks of archival documents. No bombs, no drugs, just dust, metal, and history. Dante sat silently now, eyes fixed on the dark opening. Whatever this room had been, it hadn't seen daylight in decades. The district superintendent arrived alongside 2 state investigators. No one said cover-up, but Daniels could see it in their eyes. Principal Harding suggested a story for parents. Mold detection, maybe a rodent nest. Daniels didn't respond. He crouched and peered deeper into the space. The floor was tiled in old 70s linoleum. The air smelled antiseptic, like an abandoned hospital wing. "You ever seen anything like this?" he asked a bomb squad tech. "Nope," came the reply. "But it's not explosives. That dog's reacting to something else." Then they opened the first file cabinet. Folders, dozens, some labeled with student names. Others coded for Project TS, Unit 14 debrief, echo documents, all stamped confidential, Department of Defense. Daniels stepped back. "This doesn't make any sense," Principal Harding muttered. "This is a middle school." But Daniels had already pulled up city records. Lincoln Middle used to be an Air Force admin building. The school board had purchased it in the 1980s, but apparently they hadn't demolished everything. Someone walled off a room, hid it behind a painting, and for 30 years no one noticed, except Dante. Daniels ordered the files boxed and secured. "We need an archivist, and someone needs to talk to Mrs. Carroll again." She was still in the nurse's office, sipping water from a paper cup. "That painting," she murmured. "My dad gave it to me when I graduated college. He served in Europe in the 70s. Said art helped him process what he couldn't say. I never understood." Daniels asked gently, "Do you know where he got it?" "No, he called it his last mission." Never explained. Silence hung in the air. Then she added, "He used to say some truths are better painted than spoken. I thought it was poetic. Now, I'm not so sure." Later that night, Daniels and Dante reviewed the files. One caught his eye. A hand-drawn map showing tunnels under the school. One tunnel led to the town's power station. "This wasn't just storage," Daniels muttered. "This place was built for something else." At that moment, Dante growled again. This time, he was staring at the floor. Daniels knelt, brushed away dust, and found a faint seam in the tile. He pried it open, revealing a ladder. "Wherever this goes," Daniels said, clipping on his flashlight, "we're going." And Dante, loyal as ever, followed him down into the dark. The classroom at Lincoln Middle was silent now, but it wasn't peace that filled the space. It was weight, the kind of heavy, oppressive quiet that settles after something has cracked open and no one quite knows how to put it back. Room 114 had changed. It was no longer an art room, it was a threshold. The torn canvas lay discarded like a fallen curtain revealing a stage no one ever expected to see. The metal handle embedded in the false wall still glinted under the dim light, now a symbol of everything no one could explain. Dante, the K-9 officer who'd brought the truth to the surface, remained still near the doorway. His tail low, eyes sharp. He wasn't growling anymore, but he was watching, waiting. He knew something else was coming. Officer Daniels hadn't moved much since the students had cleared out. He sat beside the torn wall, staring into the exposed cavity like it might speak if he just waited long enough. What gnawed at him most wasn't what they found. It was how they hadn't known it was there at all. The discovery had triggered a swift chain reaction. Within hours, the bomb squad had ruled out explosives, and investigators from the State Department of Education had arrived in plain clothes suits, armed with clipboards and unreadable expressions. They weren't here for safety. They were here for silence. Mrs. Carroll, the art teacher whose childhood painting had been shredded, sat quietly in the nurse's office, sipping from a paper cup. Her hand trembled each time it touched her lips. She didn't cry. She just repeated the same phrase over and over again. I didn't know that was there, and maybe she didn't. But the painting, her painting, had hidden something for decades. A room, files, names, codes, words stamped with red ink that didn't belong anywhere near children. Daniel stood and stared at the hidden space again. It wasn't just storage. The scent of antiseptic lingered in the air. The old linoleum floors were institutional. A faint chemical tang still clung to the air. This wasn't just forgotten. It had been sealed. He leaned into the doorway and turned on his flashlight. The beam revealed rusted lockers, military file cabinets, and an ancient tape recorder half buried beneath fallen plaster. The silence pressed harder here, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. He called for backup. "Get me someone who knows government archives," he said to dispatch, "and bring a translator for Cold War jargon." 10 minutes later, Principal Harding returned with a tight smile and tried to contain the panic in his voice. "We're going to keep this quiet," he said. "We'll say it was mold. Maybe a rodent infestation. Parents won't need to know about a secret room until we understand it ourselves." Daniels didn't nod, he didn't speak. He just kept the light trained on the file cabinet where one word repeated over and over again. Project TS, debrief, echo. It sounded military. It sounded classified. He pulled open the top drawer slowly. Inside were manila folders, each thicker than the last. Some were labeled with codes, others with names, student names. One file read, Unit 14, Subject 09. Inside, typed reports, scribbled notes, and old black and white photographs, grainy images of children seated in bare rooms under flickering lights. A chill ran down Daniels's spine. What kind of school used to be here? A quick record search gave the first clue. Lincoln Middle School had been built on top of a repurposed Air Force administrative facility from the Cold War era, purchased in 1983 and renovated. But the blueprints in the files showed more: rooms, tunnels, whole sections of the building no one had ever mapped. It wasn't just forgotten. It had been buried. Mrs. Carroll's father, her file said, had been stationed in Europe in the 70s. He'd returned home, but he never talked about what he did. The painting he'd gifted his daughter might not have been art. It might have been a confession. Daniels felt the shift, the emotional terrain beneath the facts. This wasn't just a hidden room. This was a cover-up layered in memory, guilt, and decades of silence. A federal team arrived with a mobile forensic lab. They carefully lifted fingerprints from the metal door, dusted for residue, and began cataloging everything. The deeper they dug, the more impossible the story became. One of the agents, a woman with a clipped tone and clinical eyes, said it first. This wasn't just an old storage room. This was an operations site. Dante, still stationed at the door, let out a low growl, barely audible. Daniels turned. The dog wasn't watching the cabinet. He was watching the floor. Daniels knelt down. The linoleum was discolored near the corner. Not mold, just slightly warped. A seam. He grabbed a crowbar. With one hard pull, the panel snapped up to reveal a narrow shaft, a ladder, another level. Daniels stared into the dark. Then he looked at Dante. "You coming?" he asked softly. They descended. The ladder creaked with every step, echoing through the shaft like a countdown. Officer Daniels descended first, flashlight clenched between his teeth. Dante following carefully, muscles tense. The deeper they went, the colder the air became, a lay. Stale, chemical chill that wrapped around their spines like a warning. When Daniels reached the bottom, his boots hit concrete. He swung the light around slowly. What it revealed didn't look like any school basement. It looked like a military relic frozen in time. The chamber was roughly the size of a small classroom. The walls were concrete, lined with rusted metal shelves and stacks of magnetic tape reels. A desk sat in the corner, its chair still tucked in, like someone had left in a hurry, or hadn't returned in decades. Along the back wall were several filing cabinets, padlocked and marked with faded yellow hazard stickers. Dante stepped beside Daniels, sniffing the air, then growled low. Daniels scanned for movement, but nothing stirred. It wasn't danger now. It was memory, echoes embedded in walls. He pulled out his phone and began filming. One cabinet had already started to rot from the bottom. Daniels forced it open. Inside, folders marked Initiation Protocol, Memory Conditioning Results, and Subject Testing 0914. The documents were old, but legible. They referenced things Daniels didn't recognize: neural pattern disruption, emotional dampening trials, and something called the silent brush technique. He opened another file labeled Subject 09. At the top, a black and white photo of a girl with large eyes and curly hair. It had a handwritten note. Artist response to trauma shows elevated cortical activity. Recommend further exposure to trigger materials. Daniels froze. That girl, it was Maggie Carroll, Mrs. Carroll, but young, 8, maybe 9 years old. The resemblance was undeniable. This wasn't just a government secret. This was her life, a part of it erased, rewritten. Daniels sat back on his heels. The tape reels were labeled with session numbers and dates. One said, Subject 09, Integration Trial 4, May 1975. He took a deep breath and reached for it. Above ground, the mobile FBI unit had set up in the faculty parking lot. Agent Beach, the lead investigator, ran the digitized documents through a secure network. It didn't take long before red flags went up. The Department of Defense had no record of Project Silent Brush. Not officially, but fragments of memos and declassified budget lines from the Cold War hinted at something. A psychological operation run by a rogue intelligence faction, possibly linked to memory suppression research. They weren't trying to create soldiers, Beach said to Daniels later that night. They were trying to erase them, rewrite the past to control the present. Daniels nodded slowly. And Maggie Carroll was their prototype. Back inside the school, Mrs. Carroll sat in her empty classroom, staring at the shredded painting. She had come in alone. No one knew. She didn't cry. She simply traced the edges of the torn canvas with trembling fingers. As she touched it, more pieces of memory came rushing back. She remembered sitting in a chair in a cold room, the hum of fluorescent lights, the same mural being projected onto a wall, a man with a clipboard nodding as she painted on command. She remembered colors being taken away from her. Blue had always been her favorite. They took it first. That evening, Daniels met with Wes Miller, the audio shop owner, and threaded one of the reels through the ancient player. Crackles filled the air. Then a voice, authoritative, clipped. Subject 09 has responded to visual triggers with expected agitation. Cortical scans show increased recall activity. Beginning. Cycle 7. A pause. Then a girl's voice, small and scared. "Where's my mom? I want to go home." The voice snapped back. Proceed with auditory dampening. Then static. Daniels turned the player off. His jaw tightened. He looked down at Dante, who had been staring at the reel the whole time, as if listening not just with ears, but with something deeper. He took out his phone and sent a voice memo to Agent Beach. The files indicate that Subject 09 was a child used in memory suppression trials. We believe she is currently teaching at the school. Identity: Margaret Carroll. This wasn't just a facility. It was an experimental lab. Possibly unauthorized. Possibly still active. Beach responded minutes later. Understood, we're escalating. Department of Historical Intelligence on standby. Daniels paced the room. Still active echoed in his head. He looked down at Dante. What else haven't we found yet? Dante wagged once, then turned toward the hallway and growled. It was never just about the painting. In the weeks following the shocking revelations at Lincoln Middle School, Officer Daniels found himself diving deeper into the connections that began with a dog's bark and led to decades-old secrets buried under layers of paint, concrete, and silence. The painting Dante had torn through wasn't just a random mural. It was a trigger, intentionally crafted using covert military visual techniques meant to reactivate suppressed memories. Techniques not seen in decades. The layered brushstrokes, muted colors, and swirling reds weren't artistic choices. They were cues, the kind designed to unlock hidden corners of the brain. Daniels sat in the FBI's temporary command center, flipping through files now marked as top priority. His hands shook slightly as he examined the note scribbled on one of the tapes. Subject: 09 shows visual recall upon exposure to red-gray patterning. Recommend test painting deployment. Subject 09 was Maggie Carroll, Mrs. Carroll, the art teacher who had unknowingly brought the very instrument of her buried trauma into her own classroom. But it wasn't guilt or coincidence that bothered Daniels the most. It was the possibility that she hadn't been alone. That's when a new file surfaced, faded, tucked behind a cabinet in the underground lab. Subject 10. No real name, no medical data, just a photo of a girl with large, haunted eyes. And a note, last seen near Southfield Orphanage. Disturbance reported by dog, entry denied. That was enough. Daniels and Agent Beach organized a full sweep of the old Southfield lot, now an overgrown commercial strip with cracked pavement and weeds breaking through forgotten sidewalks. Dante leapt from the cruiser before the engine cut. Nose low, tail stiff. He zigzagged across the lot until he stopped, dead still, in front of a manhole near the rear corner, etched faintly into the cement beside it. 10. With permits pushed through under national security clauses, a dig team was dispatched. 12 hours of excavation unearthed a sealed chamber. No door handle, no hinges, just rusted steel designed to never open again. Inside was a child-sized room, a rotting cot, molded shelves, filing cabinets. And across the back wall, under years of grime, was a child's mural, a girl, a dog, a black gate. And in the corner the words scratched into the wall with something sharp, Eddie. But the most heartbreaking discovery was the journal. Handwritten, its pages yellowed, ink bleeding from years of damp. The cover read, "They called me 10. The final entry read, "The dog never left. I think he remembers what I forgot." Daniels swallowed hard. He wasn't just reading a child's nightmare. He was witnessing a survival story no one believed had ever happened. That same week, a tip came in from a rescue center in Idaho. A woman who ran a retirement home for service dogs reported a black and white border collie arriving at her facility 11 years ago. The dog had refused to respond to any name, until someone jokingly called out, "Finn." He hadn't left the caller's side since. They flew the dog to Fairhaven. When Mrs. Carroll, Maggie, saw him, she didn't speak. She knelt. Finn walked directly to her, rested his head on her knee, and closed his eyes. Not a bark, not a sniff, just recognition, memory, silent and alive. Maggie wept. Later that week, she returned to the school, not to teach, but to deliver. A new painting, not coded, not encrypted. This one radiated warmth, soothing blues and soft yellows blending into whites and greens. A peaceful forest. 2 dogs. A girl walking toward an open door. She asked for it to be placed in the cafeteria. "For the kids," she said. The school agreed. Dante stood nearby as the new artwork was unveiled, his tail wagging slowly. Daniels felt the full weight of everything that had unfolded, the revelations, the trauma, the bravery, and most of all, the dogs, because it was never just about the people. These animals, Dante, Finn, they weren't just tools of detection. They were memory keepers, silent witnesses to the stories no one else saw. Back at headquarters, Daniels dug deeper. The files now revealed 7 additional subject numbers, each tied to canine activity, each marked with visual misalignment or canine disruption. It wasn't coincidence. These dogs had sensed the distortion. In reality, before any human eye could comprehend it, they remembered what the world tried to forget. Spring returned to Fairhaven slowly that year, not with celebration, but with quiet reflection. The leaves on the sycamores budded as they always did, but for the students and staff of Lincoln Middle School, nothing felt quite the same. Room 114 no longer existed. The school board had sealed it permanently, transforming what was once an art classroom into a memorial space called the Room Between Walls. Inside, students now walked through a gallery that didn't just display talent, it displayed truth. Pieces submitted from across the country hung under soft lighting, brushstrokes of pain, recovery, and resilience. Some were vibrant, filled with hope, others darker, uncertain, unfinished. But all of them were real. Maggie Carroll's painting, the final one, was framed at the center. In it, 2 dogs stood shoulder to shoulder at the edge of a forest clearing. One, Dante, steadfast, noble. The other, Finn, watchful, weary, but loyal. Behind them, a child's silhouette faced an open gate. Through it, only light. Daniels visited the gallery once a week, not to speak, not to patrol, just to remember. Some days he brought students, other days, veterans. One day he brought his mother. Every time he stood in front of Maggie's painting, he noticed something new. A shadow he hadn't seen, a detail he'd missed. Like memory itself, the picture kept revealing layers with time. Dante remained by his side, now semi-retired but still alert, still listening. The town had changed too. The grocery clerks knew to smile more gently. Teachers paid attention to kids who lingered after class. And a new elective was added to the school curriculum. Art and memory, how we remember. Maggie wrote the syllabus from home. She wasn't ready to return to the classroom, but her voice filled every lesson. And then came the letter. It arrived at Daniel's apartment without a return address. Inside, just 1 page. The girl in the mural. She still walks. We saw her in Kansas, with the dog. She never speaks, but she listens, always listens. A friend of 10. Daniel stared at the handwriting, his mind racing. Could she still be alive? Subject 10. The girl from the journal. The girl whose mural had whispered, "Still watching, still here." He looked down at Dante. The dog was already standing. There would be more stories, more searches, more forgotten children tucked behind institutional walls and smiling photos. But now they knew what to look for. And more importantly, they knew who to trust. Not just the evidence, not just the memories, but the dogs who remembered everything.